The Story of Sidi-Nouman. The caliph, Haroun-al Raschid, was much pleased with the tale of the blind man and the dervish, and when it was finished, he turned to the young man who had ill-treated his horse and inquired his name also. The young man replied that he was called Sidi-Nouman. Observed the caliph, "I have seen horses broken all my life long, and have even broken them myself, but I have never seen any horse broken in such a barbarous manner as by you yesterday." Everyone who looked on was indignant and blamed you loudly. As for myself, I was so angry that I was very nearly disclosing who I was and putting a stop to it at once. Still, you have not the air of a cruel man, and I would gladly believe that you did not act in this way without some reason, as I am told that it was not the first time, and indeed that every day you are to be seen flogging and spurring your horse. I wish to come to the bottom of the matter, but tell me the whole truth and conceal nothing. Sidi-Nouman changed color as he heard these words, and his manner grew confused, but he saw plainly that there was no help for it. So he prostrated himself before the throne of the caliph and tried to obey, but the words stuck in his throat, and he remained silent. The caliph, accustomed though he was to instant obedience, guessed something of what was passing in the young man's mind and sought to put him at his ease. "Sidi-Nouman," he said, "do not think of me as the caliph, but merely as a friend who would like to hear your story. If there is anything in it that you are afraid may offend me, take courage, for I pardon you beforehand. Speak then openly and without fear, as to one who knows and loves you." Reassured by the kindness of the caliph, Sidi-Nouman at length began his tale. "Commander of the faithful," said he, "dazzled though I am by the luster of your highness's presence, I will do my best to satisfy your wishes. I am by no means perfect, but I am not naturally cruel, neither do I take pleasure in breaking the law. I admit that the treatment of my horse is calculated to give your highness a bad opinion of me and to set an evil example to others, yet I have not chastised it without reason, and I have hopes that I shall be judged more worthy of pity than punishment. Commander of the faithful, I will not trouble to describe my birth. It is not of sufficient distinction to deserve your highness's attention. My ancestors were careful people, and I inherited enough money to enable me to live comfortably, though without show. Having therefore a modest fortune, the only thing wanting to my happiness was a wife who could return my affection. But this blessing I was not destined to get, for on the very day after my marriage, my bride began to try my patience in every way that was most hard to bear. Now, seeing that the customs of our land oblige us to marry without ever beholding the person with whom we are to pass our lives, a man has of course no right to complain as long as his wife is not absolutely repulsive or is not positively deformed. And whatever defects her body may have, pleasant ways and good behavior will go far to remedy them. The first time I saw my wife unveiled, when she had been brought to my house with the usual ceremonies, I was enchanted to find that I had not been deceived in regard to the account that had been given me of her beauty. I began my married life in high spirits and the best hopes of happiness. The following day, a grand dinner was served to us. But as my wife did not appear, I ordered a servant to call her. Still she did not come, and I waited impatiently for some time. At last she entered the room, and she took our places at the table, and plates of rice were set before us. I ate mine, as was natural, with a spoon, but great was my surprise to notice that my wife, instead of doing the same, drew from her pocket a little case, from which she selected a long pin, and by the help of this pin, conveyed her rice, grain by grain, to her mouth. "Amina," I exclaimed in astonishment, "is that the way you eat rice at home? And did you do it because your appetite was so small, or did you wish to count the grains so that you might never eat more than a certain number? If it was from economy, and you are anxious to teach me not to be wasteful, you have no cause for alarm. We shall never ruin ourselves in that way. Our fortune is large enough for all our needs. Therefore, dear Amina, do not seek to check yourself, but eat as much as you desire, as I do." In reply to my affectionate words, I expected a cheerful answer. Yet Amina said nothing at all, but continued to pick her rice as before, only at longer and longer intervals, and instead of trying the other dishes, all she did was to put every now and then a crumb of bread into her mouth. That would not have made a meal for a sparrow. I felt provoked by her obstinacy, but to excuse her to myself as far as I could, I suggested that perhaps she had never been used to eat in the company of men, and that her family might have taught her that she ought to behave prudently and discreetly in the presence of her husband. Likewise, that she might either have dined already or intend to do so in her own apartments. So I took no further notice, and when I had finished, left the room, secretly, much vexed at her strange conduct. The same thing occurred at supper, and all through the next day, whenever we ate together. It was quite clear that no woman could live upon 2 or 3 breadcrumbs and a few grains of rice, and I determined to find out how and when she got food. I pretended not to pay attention to anything she did, in the hope that little by little she would get accustomed to me and become more friendly. But I soon saw that my expectations were quite vain. One night I was lying with my eyes closed and to all appearance sound asleep when Amina arose softly and dressed herself without making the slightest sound. I could not imagine what she was going to do, and as my curiosity was great, I made up my mind to follow her. When she was fully dressed, she stole quietly from the room. The instant she had let the curtain fall behind her, I flung a garment on my shoulders and a pair of slippers on my feet. Looking from a lattice which opened into the court, I saw her in the act of passing through the street door, which she carefully left open. It was bright moonlight, so I easily managed to keep her in sight.